of them to one time slide here. So that was actually the route for getting IFC 4.3 as an ISO standard. Yeah, it started about 2 years ago. And there was a so-called first preparation in summer, autumn last year. At that time, we already got some early feedback on compatibility. So there were some changes made to IFC 4.3 to have a better compatibility. And then there's a so-called ISO preparation. That means the time that ISO needs in order to get everything out for ballot. Then there was this ballot process. It takes about half a year, and then was the decision, what I have just shown, 550 issues. That means the original idea to go straight to production was not possible. There was the additional round to answer all of these issues and send it back to ISO, and I think that's where we are here now. So it's sent back. And somewhere beginning of next month, in October, ISO will start FDIS voting, I mean the second ballot. And the second ballot can only be a yes or no. Yeah, you can't create new issues and so on. And expecting that it will be yes, the majority, then by the end of the year. The current target date is 15th of December, so ready for the Christmas tree. Should be the decision of having the final ISO acceptance. After this, ISO still needs a little bit of time in order to prepare the final document, send it to all national standardization bodies until it's published on the websites and so on. So I think we are, I mean, let's say we are at the end where buildingSMART can influence the process. Now it's up to ISO. I would not personally expect any difficulties, but as I said, it's now on the other side. So that's where we are. But I would say with 99%, I would expect that by the end of the year, be a positive vote. Okay, and a little bit of background, as Ivan prepared it. So we got, as I said, all to these were the ballot results. So 23 in favor, 1 against, 13 abstain. That is definitely enough to get an approval. But there was this, about 575 comments. Then that is the ISO classification. Roughly half of it was so-called technical, because in ISO you also regard a comment which is against an explanation, a text, as a technical comment, because I mean the basic thinking in ISO is to have text standards. And our thinking in buildingSMART was more like a technical comment is something that changes the schema. So that is was a little mismatch. So this is half of this was technical, and that means there had to be the second round. Then something was called more general. That's more like verbiage that has to be agreed with ISO and so on. And 200 Code of editorial comment, that was really more like spelling errors and so on, formatting errors and so on. But anyway, when you go through ISO, you get a large list of a so-called issue form, and you have to answer all of this. So there was a tremendous effort to get answer to this 575 issues. Doesn't mean you have to accept all issues, all comments. Yeah, you can also answer that you have a clear position that they are not relevant. Yeah, it doesn't say you have to. So that means some have to be resolved, not everything. But I think at the end, I think mostly there will be another graphic. Mostly the resolutions was better documentation and very little influence on the schema. Yeah, in order to get this thing, to manage this 575 comments, I think we organized 2 in-person meetings, one in Amsterdam, one in Berlin, to meet on a group. We had some Australian members that joined online. and first of all was just to get an assessment of all of these comments, how severe they are, what is affected, who should actually be responsible resolving this. And that was a great job that Evandro did. And then we went through the resolution. And we had about 2 months for this, 2 or 3 months. Summer period, it means also holidays. And I think this editorial a little bit on yes, and then there were, I think we classified about 7 or 8 of this 570 issues as being critical. Critical means that it would affect implementation, it could affect the schema and the ongoing 4.3 implementation work. And for this, these implementers forum, this group of implementers meeting, discussing the 4.3 implementation was involved in order to get their meaning. It was things like on alignment and so on, so the more critical part. So they get there saying, this was the master spreadsheet online to handle all of this, all issue classification, proposed solutions internally, externally, people, assigning it to a responsible person and so on. And that data sheet was used to guide the process. Whenever some changes had to be done on the documentation, it was handled via the GitHub framework that is now in place. So every change essentially created a comment and pull request and so on, so to get it through the GitHub system. And there was also what is called 4I principle. When you do a change, the second person has to review it and approve. So this was a kind of approval process. I think for that part, and I think particularly on the documentation part, I think this established GitHub system worked quite well. So there was some time tracking to see, how these issues were resolved over time. Coming from, can't stop this, unfortunately. So come over time. From the red, where means a lot of open issues, to 1st of September, where almost everything was finished. And I think on the 7th of September, the resubmission started. So a little bit these different assessments of technical versus documentation. So this was the kind of ISO assessment in terms of what is technical and what is editorial. And that is how we actually solved the issues, where means the big majority was real documentation improvements. There were a few 8 changes to the schema itself that would affect express and step physical file. I mean, as a schema is currently defined. Then there were several issues where we simply say no needed. That was I said, we don't have to do everything. And about what next year there will be something new, or you have to say, well, we are preparing it, and not in the next, but in the second next version, it would be executed. So these are kind of discussion, and then of course maybe get again some agreement on ISO and buildingSMART, and how to tackle this kind of compatibility. And I think it's an important thing, because let's say in reality, if somebody proposes a new work item, in almost all cases it would be accepted. People usually do not vote against a new idea, maybe only whether it's accepted at the end. There are some debates on at what level this work item should happen. Is it a report or a specification? I mean, is this non-binding or binding and so on? But there are still some discussions. But this work will come ahead, and it will definitely also affect what was discussed yesterday. What is the vision of IFC 5? Yeah, if that should be an ISO version. But these are things I think we should at least have in mind. So, and it also, of course, shows that, yeah, I mean, more and more people are investing, implementing, and so IFC. So the sensitivity on changes is getting bigger. Let's put it this way. But on the other hand, of course, you can also not say, let's forget any improvements because of compatibility. That would be the other debt. So it has to be some kind of compromise here. So in terms of the schedule, they presented it to CEN. There will be an ISO meeting in November in London, where it will be put on the table also to get some ideas. The idea was to present it also here today. And so somewhere I would say by the end of the year, there should be some decision on how to start with this work. As I said, there's some, let's say, political discussions, whether it will be under ISO or CEN lead, report or specification and so on. But let's assume that some work will start here. And I think to me, it's important, and maybe that's also I would like to start the discussion here, is how to organize the buildingSMART participation. What are the, let's say, the ideas from buildingSMART towards this? I would not advise just do nothing. So maybe good time to discuss a little bit about this idea of compatibility, both maybe from technical point of view, but also maybe from a more strategic point of view. Any ideas on your side? Yeah, maybe I should also add maybe one additional topic here is how to enable compatibility. I mean, there could also be technology to enable compatibility, like converters, translation tools, and so on. I mean, but I think to me this should all be part of this policy. I mean, of course, we cannot say we have to stick. I was also a little bit thinking back, but I think the last major change fundamental parts have been revised was IFC 2X, and that was in the year 2003 to 2005. Yeah, so that's about 20 years ago. I mean, when I say major things like, how you attach properties to objects, how you handle geometry and location in general. Yeah, I'm not saying how to add infrastructure, additional things. Yeah? But I mean, the fundamental, the architecture of IFC. The last time that it was really adapted was IFC 2X. And yes, technology advances, so there is a need to do it. But on the other hand, we now have also a legacy. I mean, millions of files, archives. You cannot say they become invalid because of it. Yeah. So there has to be, at least I would like that we have it in our mind when thinking about new things. It doesn't say it should prevent us from thinking about new things, but have it in mind that there has to be a solution for that. Yeah.
I think that local platforms that can take one version of IFC.
Well, first of all, I think we should have these technology. There should be technology solutions. But for me, from a standard point of view, the question is, if you interpret how to convert from one version to the other, it's an interpretation. And if you have multiple of these services, you could have multiple interpretations. And then the question is, which interpretation is the correct one? Also, should the interpretation, it means the mapping rule, being part of the standard again, so that everybody has the same interpretation on providing the service. Yeah. Or the mapping functions as part of a specification that is published by buildingSMART. I mean, going a little bit in that direction. Yeah. I mean, we discussed it yesterday, and maybe I'm not sure you want to say something on this big step to IFC 5. Yes, there will be. My understanding is there will be changes, of course, and they're also needed because there will be new workflows to be handled. So that is clear. But still, some of the previous, and let's say if I enable a completely new workflow that never happened before, then maybe I don't have compatibility issues. Yeah, because it's never happened before. How can I change something that has never happened? But on the same side, some of our current use cases will still remain. I mean, even if we go to transactions, we still have submissions. There would be an archival process still in future. We have this regulatory room. Yeah, there will still be submissions to a regulator, which is a kind of complete, let's say, building or infrastructure submission. So even the current use cases will not disappear immediately. Yeah, they will be enhanced by new use cases. And then you have this compatibility issue. You know, is a submission to regulator using IFC 5 completely different? You have to have two totally separate workflows for this? Or is there a way to handle that? I mean, yeah, maybe it's good. Yes, it's not.
There may be some technologies.
It's
Is
not
it better? Hello? Hello? Wait.
Hello.
You just speak loudly then.
Or maybe also something has to stand up so that the voice comes from more.
Hello? Oh, sorry.
No, it doesn't work. Or you want to come here?
Hello.
Okay. Yeah, but you know, I agree, and let's say not everything has to be handled, let's say, on the definition level. There could be technology solutions, but again, I think for me it's important. I think the work that will probably happen next year on this policy is really to identify the policy, and then maybe it would be a good idea to say where technology should help, you know, where the definitions should stay, and so on. So that's a clearer understanding. Yeah. Yeah. Karin.
It's very appealing, the idea that the IFC 5 work should also include looking into how IFC 4.4 by then will be handled. I mean, we're going in with IFC 4.3, we're going into a whole new industry, the infrastructure industry, and we will have a lot of IFC by the time IFC 5 comes along. And of course, we want to use IFC 5 technology because it's very helpful. So that's a very appealing thought, anyway, that IFC 5 should take care of how they deal with IFC 4 and 4.3 and 2.
Yeah, no, it should be part of the IFC 5 vision to deal with compatibility. And it could be a technology or something else, but I think it should be part of the roadmap. Yeah, because of these reasons. Yeah, like how you handle legacy data, and it will be there now also from infrastructure much more. Yep.
Yeah, I see a lot of challenges when you introduce more domains into the standard, and now you have.
Yeah, I think it's a very good remark, and I probably will come back on it in one of the next slides. Because one of the other issues in the moment is, and that I would like to present as also as a lesson learned from this, is in the moment we handle IFC version as one big chunk. This is IFC 4, and if we come with IFC 5, at least in terms of ISO or other organizations, is we have to take this beside and you take the next big chunk, IFC 4.4. Yeah, and you have to go always through the total. So having a kind of more modularized approach where you say these are basic definitions for geometry, which are independent of all this, or they are basic definition on how to handle properties. Yeah, how I attach a property to a beam, or to a road surface, or to a ship whatsoever, still the same mechanism. So I have a few things which are independent of domain extensions. So can we encapsulate them in a way, even in the definitions, so that could remain unchanged, and you only maybe enhance the classification of, I don't know, of terms for, let's say, an energy provider. Yeah, because maybe they have masts and so ever. So I think that is something which, in my view, also should be kind of lessons learned. And maybe this could also tie good with the IC5 idea of being more modularized or more componentized. And I will have a few slides on that as well, because this was also one of the general critiques. And I think I will come to it.
Can you say something about IFC 4.4?
Not officially, because I have no idea what is the real official stand on 4.4 in terms of ISO. I heard that there's a wish to go to ISO, but I haven't heard about.
Possibly comments.
Yeah. Neither do I. I mean, I hear that there's the idea to take it forward because of major domains like tunnel, but I haven't seen any kind of action.
So Michelle Reeves and the tunnel team will be in here later today, just after lunch actually. I think he'll be talking about IFC 4.4.
Yeah, but I'm interested in the ISO.
Yeah. And then to me, it's also, if that happens, is would we have a chance to, if it goes to ISO? When I heard about that, it's a goal, but because I don't know about any concrete plans or actions. But if the idea is to bring IFC 4.4 to ISO, would it be good enough to say this is an isolated tunnel definition that goes there, or do we have to resubmit everything again?
Okay, comment as well. There is leftover items.
Yeah. Okay, and now actually this lessons learned from the process. I mean, in the moment, as I said, it's purely procedural. In ISO, it means you submit a new edition of the specification. It's really like this. You take the old version away and get the new version. The official verbiage in these ISO standards is it's a standard verbiage. This version cancels and replaces the previous version of the standard. That means theoretically, you replace 2,000 pages of documentation by another 2,000 pages of documentation. Yeah, just theoretically. And to me, this is not viable anymore. I mean, you can't organize the review process for that, and so on. And again, I mean, I think what is really submitted as the buildingSMART 4.3 standard, it was at the end, it was about 50 megabytes of zip file. I mean, hardly anyone can, tell me the expert that can handle 2,000 pages. So, and one of the other things, for example, from this 550 issues we got, probably about 1/3 was actually not against anything new in IFC 4.3. Yeah, it was against previous things.
It's important to communicate that.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, there were for good reasons, and yes, so that for me is also a strong concern. Is we can't really handle this kind of single one document per standard approach anymore. And also theoretically, I mean, when we created the ISO home for IFC, this new standard 16739, it was created as a multi-document standard. Yeah, that's why it's actually -1. Yeah, there could also be a -2, a -3, a -155. Yeah, so it was meant to be, and the idea was like other organizations like OGC and STEP and so on, they have these multiple approaches. And that's maybe where you come with the application protocols. And then if in future there would be some, let's say, improvements, for example, adding a new geometry type, I don't know, voxel, for example. Yeah, then this could be a change to, let's say, the geometry foundations of IFC, but not to everything else. So to me, that is, I would say, we should be lessons learned. We should carry forward. And the second one is, So the really thing, yesterday we discussed in this IFC 5 session, how to get more modular and so on. I think the same actually is not just about the serialization, that you should not always send a full IFC file of everything, but also be able to send updates and so on. To me, I think it also goes down back to the specification itself, that you should have this multiple part documentation and so on. I mean, in IFC, there are some sub-schemas, you know about the geometry source and so on, but they're not really handled separately yet. The second thing, what I also think it's a difficulty in keeping everything updated. We really think about 2,000 and more pages, entries, and so on. We have a lot of overlap between schema structure and descriptions. For example, in our written text of the documentation description, quite often there you find a sentence, for building elements, there are the following subtypes. Then you have a concept template where you probably say you have to deal with the subtypes. And then you have the schema itself that has these subtypes. And now somebody adds, from a domain extension, another subtype. But he forgot that somewhere on page 555, it's written in text. There's a lot of duplicates, which make it hard to update in a consistent way. Because often quite also different people are doing it. So maybe we have to be, some kind of policy. Don't replicate in text what is already derivable from the schema, or make it automatic again. You know what I mean? There's a lot of these things which is make it difficult to update it in a consistent way. And then the other one is what we also learned is, this GitHub system to have a central repository for making updates is a great thing. That really works fine. But it only works in the moment for the markdown part, for the text. Whenever we have a change in the schema, there's this one big enterprise architect file that is handled as, you're laughing, but it's, yes, you get, 2 megabytes of updates to the GitHub system. It's not workable. How can you trace changes in a 2 megabyte XML file? So also there, I think we have to break it down in smaller parts that are handled individually. We need more people that are able to.
So, for example, sorry, maybe something else was raising.
No.
So, for example, if you were to have a 6739-2, compare the geometries, that would make 6739-2. Does that mean it can be used in other, on its own? It makes parts of the schema, as it is today, accessible to maybe a broader implementation.
Yeah. For example, let's take another example. People may say yes or no to step, that's a personal opinion, but the step part for geometry is an individually defined part. In my view, it has a high quality, and we're using it and not caring about the rest of step. It's separately published. It can also have its own versioning. If you have a new geometry resource, you don't have to reversion, the tunnel extension, or something else, the scheduling. And maybe it's also easier to then have responsible people that say these are the geometry experts that are in the group that handle this geometry extension, and don't ask maybe a domain to go through everything. That's also something, at least for me. I have been part of this IFC development from the very beginning. I think the idea of adding domain semantics on elements, which essentially is a classification of elements, as subtypes in the schema is also not maintainable. It was done 25 years ago when IFC started, and I showed you this timeline. The only domain was essentially architecture, with everything started. And I can count the wall, beams, windows and doors on my hand, and that's, let's do it. But now with all these domains having this huge decomposition, specialization tree, again, in my view, that's not maintainable. So we should have almost like an another resource. I mean, I'm very much in favor of specifying the domain semantics here. I don't think it's enough to say there's omni-class, there's this and that, because they are all different and they are only valid in certain countries. So I'm very much in favor of having a domain specification of the specification tree, but we shouldn't put it into, let's say, subclass of, but maybe more like a published documentation structure that can be referenced, more like in this idea. But I still think it's good to have a buildingSMART classification. And essentially, IFC is a buildingSMART classification. If you look at IFC element, it's a classification system. My personal view is you got to put some number in front a few years ago, but it's a classification. Right. Any other questions around here? Because I think, to me, that is more or less the last page. Yeah. So I would emphasize just really think more like, going to this kind of multi-document part, using this numbering system in some way to differentiate between basic definitions like geometry, like the core schema, like, there are entities, there are relationships, there are properties. These are kind of core definitions for me. That's also kind of core part, or alignment, or classification and so on. So they're core parts. But then maybe think about extensions, which are more domain driven. And the other good thing is, and really there are examples like O2C. They also have multiple different parts when they publish their GIS definitions, or even STEP has multiple part structure. So there are difference for that. And then, the individual part could have their own version history. You don't have to change everything if there's a need to change one thing. So for me, I had the idea, yesterday I got the feeling that this matches actually quite nicely with these IFC 5 ideas. I don't know, Angeli, any points for that? But I'm not quite sure what we do in between.
Is there any short summary of the IFC 5 ideas that's learned from the IFC 5 workshop?
Do you want to do that? Probably closer. Craig has left. But then maybe it's better to talk here that people can listen.
I mean, short.
Very short, yeah. Yeah. Well, my short summary is that it also looks into maybe getting it more componentized. I mean, but more driven. Let's say what I was discussing or seeing and discussing yesterday was more, of course, driven on the actual realization that the data distribution. That should not be a big IFC file for everything, but more smaller parts. But maybe you have been more involved in this later.
Yeah, I mean, basically, about taking the IFC concepts that we already have, componentizing them so that we have them in chunks that are easier to store in the clouds, easier to retrieve, easier to get information from, and easier to then in the future add to the specification without having to rewrite everything or, go through another ISO process when you go to 4.4, 4.5, or 4.6. So again, in 30 seconds or less, that's the idea there. And there will be recordings later with the IFC session. So,
but at least, for example, I saw things like, you think about one component of entity definitions, its location and its geometry. Right. So then also, let's say, to me, the standardized definition on how the specification and geometry is actually described could be also then, let's say, componentized to be. That's the definition for this part of the entity. So there I saw analogies.
Yeah. Right.
I'm not sure what the all technical means will be. I mean, language and so on how to express it. But at least from the basic idea, I saw some similarities. But on the other hand, it's a long-term effort, I would assume. Yes. Then we're not, how we are handling those workflows that we already have, like IFC 4.4.
I think in the
in the future, there is another issue to solve, it's how to address, solve the 145 issues and points in the list of.
Yeah.
So it's part of the question in the future.
Yeah, I personally would feel, again, my understanding of IFC 4.4 is that it's a merger from what is a new domain extension coming from tunnel plus some ongoing demands to change things in other domains. But I personally believe that this 145 open issues belong to the IFC 4.4 timeframe. You cannot submit another intermediate version to ISO without addressing them. So to me, I think it should probably be part of this. Not part of the tunnel extension, but part of the joint effort to bring it as IFC 4.4.
So you project the department.
Yep. Okay. Any further questions? I mean, at the end, I also have only a question, not an answer. But yeah.
My question is, as always, the Express schema and UML schema, when will they be available?
I think at least the Express schema itself, I think it's published as an. You mean this ISO publication now? This what is submitted? That it has an Express schema?
That's a question.
I think it should be part of the package.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that the UML file itself, the XMI file, is part of the package. And the other thing, what we are also missing right now is we do not have a graphical representation anymore, because nobody is able to take the effort to create a real, let's say, UML graphic. Yeah, I think that's in the past there was a graphical representation that even was still somebody remember this this large IFC on one poster thing, this Express diagram. So I think that's also something we are missing. To have a sort of kind of single representation as a graphical schema.
I have these things at home.
Yeah.
But I think that the UML one would be very nice to have if one could really put efforts into that.
Yeah.
Because then you understand all the relationships.
I think that's something missing. This kind of on this overview thing. Yeah. Right. Well, if there are no further questions, I think, we're almost good in time. So we'll probably get the first coffee outside. We stop now. Okay, then thanks for attending. And yeah.